quickly come up. The next topic here, it's been brought up a few times. It is energy security and its role behind the scenes in issues of democracy, corruption, reform, economic growth, independence. All of these things that we're talking about on the surface sound like political, structural issues, but also under the surface, you have the influence of energy and the financial resources and the big powers that go with that. And so to turn to that topic now, we have Batu Kutelia with the Atlantic Council of Georgia and helping out as an organizer of this conference as well. We have Ed Chow from CSIS. We have former Prime Minister Kirkilas from Lithuania, all of whom have worked extensively on these energy security issues. Batu, if you're ready, I'm going to turn it to you to get us started.
Technically, are we ready? Okay, we can start. Once again, it's such a great pleasure and honor to have a distinguished audience and such a good timing to move from the excellent discussion of the previous panel of the values, morale, and the principles to the more down to the earth issue of the energy and energy security. And we could not wish better panel than we have today. Edward Chow and Prime Minister Kirkilas. I would rather save time introducing their biographies because you could read it, but their experiences in academic, private sector and political spectrum dealing with the issues related to the energy and its wider implication would be enormous benefit of our purpose of our conference, which is titled World in Flux, and energy has a role to play in it, as well as then practical implications I hope we can draw for Georgia particularly, which faces quite a significant challenges vis-à-vis Russia, particularly on energy dimension of it, and as part of the hybrid warfare, weaponization of energy. So I would like to offer you to do kind of a zooming strategy for our discussion, describing the global trends in energy and also new components of the energy policy, particularly from the US side, especially when we have Secretary of State who comes as a top official of the energy company. And with your experience, Ed, maybe you can give us some insights how the energy executives see the politics of the energy globally and in Europe, and then particularly in our region. Please, I would like to give the floor to you.
Well, he worked for a competing oil company for 41 years than the one that I worked for, so I won't speak on behalf of Rex. But let me, Batu, thank you for the introduction. Let me make maybe 3 short points. One with the global picture, one on how it affects the region, and then to Georgia specifically, 1 point each. I think in the global picture, since the rise of oil prices and the abrupt drop in oil prices in the middle of 2014, I think we've seen oil prices in a trading range around $50, and it looks like it's going to stay that way for quite a long time, unless there is a political event that not only causes political uncertainty, but actually interrupts production in some serious way. So we're talking about political turmoil, not just the idea of uncertainty. The example I would give you is the shrug of shoulders the market's basically given to what's going on in Venezuela right now. I mean, a few years ago, if what's been going on in Venezuela were happening today, that's happening today, you would have seen a reaction to oil prices, and the markets have basically shrugged. And so unless something interrupts production, we're going to be in a trading range probably for the next few years. The reason for that, partly fundamentally because of the cyclical nature of the industry, but also because the development of American shale oil and shale gas has seemed to put a ceiling on how high prices can rise, and the market seemed to have accepted that. The second point I would make is the relatively lower oil prices, what stress that puts on to the oil-based economies in this region. And by this region, I mean, given the title of the conference, including the Middle East, for example, certainly including Russia, but also in the immediate region, countries like Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan. Now, that's partly due to very bad habits that governments tend to acquire at a time of boom years in oil prices. So it's not the drop in oil prices to relatively more moderate level, but the waste of that resource during the boom years with vanity projects. I don't know how many of you have been to the Astana Expo, the Baku European Indoor Games, whatever that is, are projects that cost a lot of money that doesn't give countries much return, whereas if they had invested it in infrastructure, in education, health, there might be a longer return. But since these governments have difficulties in terms of political legitimacy to begin with, the economic stress would put on additional political stress in this system, and that could affect the region as well. The third and last point I would make is the importance of infrastructure, transportation of oil and gas, which is where Georgia plays a role, is even more important. The cost efficiency, the cost effectiveness of bringing oil and gas to market is even more important at a time of low commodity prices than commodity prices are high. When commodity prices are high, you can do all kinds of projects that may be economically suboptimal. I think of Nord Stream 2 and Turkish Stream, for example, as to, there's rationale behind them. Commercial, political, geopolitical logic behind it, but the price tag is much higher when the affordability of those projects become important. So stressing projects that have cost efficiency and effectiveness, and here Georgia plays a role, is very important to the industry during these times.
Thank you, Ed. And since you mentioned the transportation as a key component of the energy policies, we've seen recently that energy transportation became a part of the Russian hybrid weapons as a tool of influencing the policies or the free choices. And just recently, last couple of years, there is a huge debate in Georgian society of the deal that the Georgian government, secret or confidential deal, Georgian government signed with the Gazprom, referring that the energy is not a political issue and it's a commercial, etc. We're delighted to have you here, Prime Minister Kirkilas. Lithuania is one of the most successful countries who managed to change these dynamics, successfully utilizing technology, notwithstanding many arguments of the price tag of LNG terminal. And now last couple of months already, we see that US natural gas being imported to Lithuania, and that's a new trend. So if you could share some of your experiences in this regard.
Thank you very much, and let me say thank you very much, first of all, for the Mackay Institute and possibility to speak here. And let me start from the, I don't know if it's a joke or not, but as I see and I look to the European Union, not only European Union countries, more dependent on the Gazprom gas, this country more love Russia. It's very interesting. Not Russia, but actually Putin regime. That is obviously today. They have, of course, different arguments and so on. But anyway, let me briefly say where we are now. I can say that Lithuania today almost independent and energy security country. Almost. There are, of course, some details. I will stop on that later. But what is our experience? First, energy blockade happened in Lithuania 1990, just after 2 months when we are declared independence. And in this situation, we have to introduce in our government special vice prime minister, which have some deals with this energy blockade. Georgia is actually summer country, but Lithuania is a winter country. Can you imagine what does it mean to block gas and heating for our country? It's and since that we understand that energy is a tool which Russia can use for us. By the way, not only with the blockade, they are interfering in our political process, with the prices, for example. And let me briefly say where we are today. First of all, we have Butinge terminal, crude oil terminal, import-export terminal, which working for the crude oil Mažeikių Nafta factory. We can have crude oil from the Baltic Sea, from the market. Interesting is that when I've been approved as a prime minister of minority government, just despite our declarations that Lithuania want to have good relation with Russia, after 2 weeks they are shut down Druzhba crude oil pipeline. Druzhba, you know that? What does it mean? Druzhba, it's a friendship. And still not working, by the way. Thanks God, we have a crude oil terminal. Second, of course, what you mentioned, our LNG terminal. I believe that it's the biggest our success. Biggest our success. It was starting to build during the Andrius Kubilius time. Our government then finished a few years ago. And today we have 70% gas from the LNG and 30% from the Gazprom. But interesting is that just when we have built LNG terminal, Russia suddenly reduced from the 1/3 prices to us. So today we have more or less, but not only. We also, Lithuania was among the first country which introduced so-called third package. And we are reduced Gazprom via divorce pipeline from the gas producing. And today it's also working for the how to reduce the prices for the consumers. And using this opportunity, let me say thank you for the machinery company which are providing first months ago, first 200,000 cubic meters gas for Lithuania, and not only for Lithuania, by the way, also for the Latin and Estonia. Actually, our LNG terminal have capacities 4 billion cubic meters. Lithuania, for example, using a bit more than 2 billion cubic meters per year. Actually, this terminal can work for the all 3 Baltic countries. We are still discussing on the details. So, let me say that also I'd like to say thank you for Senator McCain, which always supporting us and always asking the United States authorities made decision to send shale gas in the liquid format to Lithuania, to the Baltics, to the Europe. And we are among the first. We are proud, and it's very important to use. Third, we have enough electricity produced generation capacities. And also, we have good capacity and interconnection with some countries, European Union countries. First of all, so-called Svedlit, the interconnection with Sweden, 400 megawatts capacity. With Poland, Lithuania 1, we need more. We need second, actually, but it's a second. And also we can have electricity from Estonia, which have interconnection with Finland. So fourth point is actually we have today electricity energy market, quite competitive. And fifth, also Lithuania, according as a member of European Union, we are producing by the renewables approximately 16–18% today, and we have to achieve 20 up to the 2020. So we are, of course, producing renewable electricity from biomass, from sun, from wind, and hydro. So that is what we have today. And what we are doing, what is our activities? I mentioned about that Lithuania, one of the first countries which introduced so-called third package. Let me say that not all European Union countries introduced that. We have been among first. And also, Lithuania was among the initiators of energy security policy and common energy market in the European Union more than 10 years ago. Today it's happened, and let me share with you last news from the European Parliament. Today, European Parliament approved the package. I can imagine how we would need this package 10 years ago, about the gas solidarity. In case if Russia would be used gas blockade or something like that against European Union countries. Today decision in the European Parliament. So, and problems. We have some problems which we have to resolve somehow. First of all, of course, synchronization with the European Union market. Full synchronization. I mentioned about our links to the Sweden, to the Poland. We need more. We need 2 links to the Poland. And also we have to make decision, rejoin from the so-called BREL. It's a technical agreement. We are still in the Russian electricity networks. But all, even technical decisions with Russia coming political. If you following President Putin, he said that because we have Kaliningrad enclave and some transit going through the Lithuanian territory, he said first time, probably for the CNN, he said, we have to ask from Lithuania and European Union 1 billion compensation if Lithuania rejoined from the BREL. Second time it was 2 billion, and but our plan is to rejoin from the BREL approximately in 2025. That is plan. And of course, the problem is Astrava nuclear power station, which is totally geopolitical project to push Lithuania. We understand that our parliament approves the law. We cannot have the electricity from this nuclear power station. That's, of course, decision. But to fulfill this decision, we have to be in the we have to be synchronized with the European Union market. And so it's a question, of course. Let me say that one of the famous academicians in Belarus said, Belarusian, during the Lukashenko regime time, he said, there is no worse place for the nuclear power station in Belarus than Astrava place. And that is true, actually. So, and last point, of course, you know that Lithuania is still not decided. There are many reasons on the new nuclear power station. Otherwise, we have to decommissioning old 2 reactors, Ignalina nuclear power station. It's quite costly. It's, of course, also energy problem. But I believe that together with the European Union support, financial support first of all, because it's our commitment when we are joined to the European Union, we have a possibility to resolve. And also, we are still discussing, there was a lot of discussion, hard discussion, even a referendum on the new nuclear power station in Lithuania. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Excellent observations and very good news you just mentioned. I really liked your observation that where is the more Gazprom it's visible more love towards Russia or the pro-Russian sentiment. It's obvious that some of those Gazprom money has been spent on cultivating that feelings, which we could see and observe here in our part of the region. And definitely that becomes a security issue, national security issue. There is always one dilemma, has been since the breakup of the Soviet Union, and several ways of attempts expanding the boundaries of democracy in post-Soviet space, dilemma of pragmatic interests of the energy supplies, and the principles and values of democracy. So, how you would perceive the options for US and Western energy policies in our part of the region? And since you mentioned that Georgia is in a critical place, well, Georgia has several times been mentioned a distinguished democracy in the region, but how you would position this possibly trade-off between the strategic interests and values of democracy?
Well, let me first maybe respond or react a little bit to what was said earlier by the Prime Minister, which is that clearly American LNG, the export of American LNG, which has just started, is a very important development for the global LNG market, not just in Europe. It brings additional supply of gas into the global market. LNG is more likely now, more able to be traded on a spot basis than long-term contracts with this rigidity and the possibility of political pressure because of the long-term nature of the project. It provides gas whose pricing is not at all linked to oil, which is also a very important development. But I have to say that we need to temper the optimism sometimes coming out of American politicians' mouths on how big of a game changer it's going to be to the U.S., to the European gas market. The natural home for American LNG is South America, first. Secondly, the Far East. That doesn't mean, for all the reasons I already gave, it wouldn't have a beneficial impact on Europe as well. But we need to be cautious about whether the possibility of whether U.S. LNG would at all displace Russian gas in the European market. I think the expectations have to be a lot more limited and more cautious. What it forces Russia to do is to meet the market price if they want to protect market share. So that's already a very good thing. You know, without the LNG terminal, they wouldn't have to offer Lithuania a more reasonable gas price. So that is clearly beneficial. So here I return to forcing Gazprom to play according to market rules. And I have to say, as an outside observer, I'm very disappointed by European Commission's decision on the competition case against Gazprom, where there were no penalties assessed at all, at least up until now, on past anti-market behavior by a market-dominant player, which has a special requirement under European legislation. I just, as an American, I wish that the Commission would treat Gazprom the same way they treat Microsoft and Google. Then I'll be happy. So forcing, applying European rules to the market players is really important. And I have to say, there are incumbents inside Europe, European companies, who are against some of those anti-competitive rule setting. So I think that is the most important thing, is to make sure you apply. But you know, I'm an energy person. So democracy, rule of law is a little bit beyond my competence, but making sure that the market rules apply to everyone, including countries that may apply political pressure as part of the negotiating process, is really important.
Thank you, Ed. And before turning the opportunity to ask some questions from the audience, Mr. Prime Minister, and I hope and I'm sure that your previous comments will be well heard by the Georgian government, and I'm sure some of the representatives are here. So what would be your recommendations to the Georgian government currently in terms of the energy policy and, more importantly, energy security policy?
Well, very good question, but first of all, I would recommend for the Georgian government to use any geopolitical opportunity to improve situation in particular on the energy security. Second, of course, Georgia have to have long-term strategy. We are in Lithuania, discussing very hard on this strategy. Actually, each new parliament discussing on that. Each new parliament trying to improve the strategy. But main points, it's a long-term strategy. First of all, independence from the Gazprom, connections, and join to the European Union market. And of course, everything have to be based on the political consensus in Georgia. Political consensus not only for your main political goals, as I understand, it's NATO, European Union, but energy here also more or less on the same level, which need political consensus. We can discuss on the social security, we can discuss on the economical part, taxation, everything, but 3 points: defense, security, energy security among them.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. While I had an intention to give some opportunity for the questions, and since Ed mentioned it's important to respect rules, there is a very strict McCain Institute rule of timing, and I would like to stop here. I hope we will have some opportunities to ask questions to our distinguished panelists, but let me join in thanking them before I hand over to Kurt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Batu, and thanks to you for moderating. Of course, our distinguished panelists will be here throughout the conference tomorrow as well, so there's ample opportunity. We do, however, have to break off now. For those who have been invited, you'll have received a card. The President's reception will begin at 7 p.m. and there will be buses leaving from the front, so please proceed immediately if you are on that list to go to the reception hosted by the President. For all of you and for all of our participants and guests, we resume tomorrow here at 10 a.m. here outside, so we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. Thank you for a great first day.